Hello and welcome to the Bee Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast. I've been looking forward to this conversation with formerly Dr. Alan Watkins. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Thanks for having me, B.
No, thank you. I have been really looking forward to this because when I checked you out and read up on you, I was like, wow, you've got a lot of, I guess, academia as well as a lot of experience. And I was quite chuffed that you agreed to come on and chat with me. So thank you in advance to our conversation that we're about to have. First things first, I'd like to introduce you. You're a physician, a neuroscientist, and the CEO and co-founder of Complete, which was formerly Complete Coherence. And it's a leadership and organizational development firm that you founded with your wife, Sarah Watkins, in 2004. So, what, 21 years? Oh, hang on. Am I right? Yeah. No, how many years? 21?
Yeah,
Yeah, 21. I'm,
yeah.
I'm like, I'm like adding, I'm thinking, hang on a second. And the work you both do integrates physiology, neuroscience, and systems thinking to develop leaders, teams, and organizations worldwide. You've authored 12 books to date, and still counting, still going by the sounds of things. Author of Coherence, 4D Leadership, and other various titles. You're also a popular TEDx speaker. And you also, I should have asked you, are your books, but you also focus on solving the world's toughest problems. Last year it was around education, and this coming year it's about, I didn't write that down.
AI.
AI and AI and human connection. Yes, exactly. I should say you're also based in the UK, and I forgot to even ask you whereabouts you are in the UK.
We're about an hour southwest of London, but I used to live in Australia. So, in fact, my best mate still lives in
That's right.
Australia.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
right. Is he in Brisbane?
Yeah, up,
Yeah.
Alexander Heads.
Yeah, right. Where did you live in Brisbane or were you in
I
Sydney?
lived in Brisbane. I lived in Caboolture. For a while, I was a GP at Port Douglas.
Ah,
Um,
that would have been
so,
fun.
difficult spot.
I love it. Oh, there you go.
Mm.
Talk about 6 degrees of separation. Well, I lived in London many, many years ago in my early 20s when I was backpacking before coming back and getting into work. But let's chat. I want to hear all about your journey. So physician, neuroscientist, and then going into what you're doing now. And I will say, when you also booked in for the podcast and I asked you what's one unique insight or lived experience when it comes to life leadership and or business, your one word was complete. And I
Mm.
want to talk about that word complete as well. We didn't talk about this pre-show, but I think that you have to complete things in life, whether you like them or not, but there's a form of needing to complete things to then move forward. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that and why the word complete, which is all wrapped up around your business as well. So over to you.
Yeah, so in terms of why did I stop being a doctor,
Yeah.
most of my colleagues thought I was mad. There was a terminal salary pension scheme, which is it's illegal now, but I mean, when I gave up, years ago, and really, it's because I found when I was a doctor, a cardiologist at one point, it's always been about reducing human suffering at scale for me. And I had 50 patients on the ward, 150 in the outpatients, 200 souls to look after, and it was not a big enough scale. So I was a GP for a while, partly on the Barrier Reef, where most GPs have 2,000 patients, but you learn fairly quickly that 1,800 are healthy. You never see those. You only see 200 again. So you can't ever get to scale. So I thought, well, actually, I'm not living the life I was meant to live. So if I leave medicine and I go and work with big corporations, some of our clients have, 400,000 employees globally, you're at scale.
Yeah.
Um, and the sort of general view is that uh, poor leadership causes suffering. Now, it's a different kind of suffering than you see as a medical doctor. As a
Mm.
medical doctor, you're largely dealing with physical suffering and end of life suffering. But bad leadership causes suffering, a lot of it psychological suffering, performance, financial hardship. It's just a different type of suffering, but it's bad leadership causes suffering nevertheless. So in working, we have about 100 multinational clients. I have 20 coaches that work for me. So we go all over the world trying to improve the quality of leadership to reduce suffering. And also, it's much earlier on in the sort of cycle, as it were, if you can get to people earlier on before they end up having all the physical problems, then some of those physical problems are prevented.
Yeah.
So it was going upstream and working at a bigger scale, which is why I left. And to your point about complete isn't really about being a completer finisher, ticking off a to-do list. It's more understanding that you already are complete as a human being. You already
Ah,
have everything you need. It's more about that.
okay. Fascinating. Wow. I've got so many questions already for you in terms of, I knew that this was going to be a great conversation because this having been a physician and then taking that into the corporate world and you talked around the physical and the mental and almost the preventative and I briefly mentioned to you without going into all the details of it I've recovered from my severe medically diagnosed burnout, but I do think there was ways it could have been prevented. And, you talked around this suffering and leadership. And I also think there's something to do with the system and the system that you're involved in or you're part of that causes a lot of the, I guess, symptoms, if you like, or what you see as leadership suffering and then the people. And I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the way that we think about it is there are certain systems, you say, there, wherever your environment is, a corporate environment, a social environment, there are things outside of you, but that's not the only thing to pay attention to. So the world out there, the rational, observable, objective world, that's what most people are addicted to the exclusion of the world in here, inside of us. And then there's a third world, which is the relational world. So when we work with organizations and CEOs around the world, we talk about these three worlds. There's the world of it. What is it that I'm doing? The systems, the processes, the environment that I'm in. And then what about the interpersonal world of relationships? And then the inner world of who you are as a human being. So we call this the I, the we, and the it.
Mm,
So there are these three worlds, and a lot of the problems that we see is because leaders have become one-dimensional. They've become human doings, addicted to task, target, goal, metric, outcome, and they've disconnected with their inner world of who they are as a person. And often they don't spend enough time skilling up in the interpersonal world. So the first sort of start point of the journey, whether we coach individuals or coach leadership teams, is trying to help them understand a bit more fully that they're three-dimensional, not one-dimensional, and all problems exist in all three dimensions, and therefore all solutions require you to pay attention to all three dimensions of the I, the we, and the it, not just the it.
yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Why do you think that leaders of today are so addicted to the external? I mean, I was, and then I had to go through a full, I guess inside out transformation myself to go and understand what's actually going on in here because my purpose and my soul was screaming at me. I had ignored it for
Yeah,
so long. I'd ignored the internal for so long.
yeah,
And it got to a point when I had no choice but to actually have
yeah,
to go
exactly.
back within and start there. And it was a lot of deep inner work that I had to do. But why? And I see it in a lot of leaders, and I see a lot of, at times mirrors being held up to me where I'm like, oh, I was that, and or sometimes I even, I have to go, hang on a second, Belinda, ego here, like stop, I call myself Belinda when I'm being serious with myself. But like,
Mhm.
what do you see? Why do we as leaders get so addicted to the external when you talk about this, we are all complete at the end of the day. Like, is it avoidance? Is it that we don't want to know ourselves? Like, what is it? Like, what do you see? What's your view on that?
Well, it's why you get hired and fired. So leaders are hired to deliver a result out there, and if they don't, that's why they get fired. So it draws the attention, and everybody is paying attention to the same stuff. You get rewarded for the numbers that you deliver as a business leader. So it's not surprising that that's where most of the attention goes. If you don't deliver the numbers, you're out. And therefore you suffer financial hardship, psychological, and all of that kind of stuff. So that's essentially why. And also, it's observable. And everybody around you is also similarly addicted to you. So when everybody's addicted to the task, target, goal, metric, and everybody's paying scant attention, as you yourself experience, Bee, to what's going on inside of them, people look around, they're getting hired and fired on their it addiction, and everybody else is operating in the same way. And nobody notices that we've become disconnected from our interior. In fact, you didn't notice, which until you had your meltdown. And then
Which,
that was your wake up call is
yeah.
hang on a minute, there's this other whole world, my interior world, ego, virtue, consciousness, morality, all these things inside of you that most people pay scant attention to. I was in France, in Paris last week with 50 leaders, and we were talking about the nature of change. And I said, what is it you think that determines whether change projects are successful or unsuccessful? And they gave me 16 examples of the it things that you need to pay attention. Four examples, just starting to realize that successful change is about relationship and interactivity, and not one single example of their own personal change, their own interior. And we see this repeatedly when you ask people, what do you think the problem is and what do you think the solution is? All the problem is in the it as they see it, and all the solutions are in the it, largely because they don't even realize that there's an I and a we. And they might just realize, they work in organizations, lots of people, that relationship and culture eat strategy for breakfast. So at some vague level that relationships are important and culture is important, but their interior, it's often completely ignored,
Mm.
which is ironic because, as you know, leadership is an inside out. It starts with I. And if you mature, if you drop your ego and you mature as a human being, you become better in the we. As you become better in the we, the collective can smash the it.
Yeah, and that's when everyone can actually, shine their brightest is the term I like to use, and
Mm,
feeling and performing at their best, and being able to get
mm,
into that collective flow state. So tell me a little
mm.
bit about then. So is that where the leadership and the suffering piece comes from? Because we're not, you said it, but what did you say exactly? You said something around leadership and suffering.
Well, poor leadership creates suffering for
That's
the
right.
for themselves, for the team, for the
Yeah.
organization, for the customer base, and so on. And so the solution is inside out, is you start looking at yourself. The biggest game changer is not some process improvement in the it or some organizational efficiency or a tweak of the operating model. The biggest game changer is you change yourself. So, I often get people to do the thought experiment. If, as a neuroscientist, I can show you how to make your mind go 4 times faster than it's ever gone in your entire life, would that be useful? People go, oh, that'd be amazingly helpful. I get my job done by Tuesday lunchtime. I could play golf the rest of the week.
Yeah.
I said, okay, in addition to the quadrupling the speed, what about I treble the quality, i.e., you have thoughts 3 times better quality than you've ever had in your entire life? Would that be used? Oh my God, that would be amazing. So I said, okay, so if we're going to quadruple the quality, quadruple the speed and treble the quality, when was the last time you had a meeting with yourself to figure out how to do that? And they go, what do you mean a meeting with? I don't have a meeting with myself. Why not? Too busy doing things. So the very thing that would game change people's life, people are so consumed with their it addiction. The
Mm.
thing that would make the biggest difference, which is you quadruple the speed and treble the quality, I literally don't even have time to figure out how to do that. So there's the nature of the it addiction. So until you break the addiction, until people wake up to the fact, as you did, Bee, that there's this whole inner world which is more game changing than any business process re-engineering, any tweak of the strategy, is you game change the quality of those human beings in the system. If you level them up, if you help them become more and more mature, and that's essentially what we're doing in the business, is helping people to unlock these levels that they don't even know exist because they look around, everybody seems to be at the same level as them, everybody seems to be as
Yeah.
it addicted as them, and they don't realize there's all these levels they're not even aware of, which are totally game changing. So that's essentially what we're doing, helping people to wake up and grow up.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I did a 6 month training course earlier this year with Scott Barry Kaufman. I don't know if you know him. He's a psychologist out of the US, and it was self-actualization,
Mhm.
and coming back to foundations, the found like build like ensuring that your foundations are in order. And again, I'd love your thoughts on this. From a like what you're talking about, like going back within and going, hang on, are my foundations sort of, have I got a leaky bucket or a leaky boat? And then, the only way you can then tap into the next level or the next layer from is to establish and have those foundations where you've got that self-awareness, you've got the self-esteem, you've got the trust in yourself, but it's also the same that applies with your team and your business to then to be able to really transcend and experience and grow. And it was a really defining moment for me because I was like, oh my gosh, for so long I've just been plugging holes in this leaky bucket of mine
Mm.
and
Mm.
using external band-aids, if you like.
Mm.
And then it's like, oh, yes, this is what I needed to do all along is get those foundations sorted and rock
Yeah.
solid to
Well,
then be,
Scott is a great teacher. I think he's won awards for teaching. So he's a great teacher, and the conscious capitalism and all of that. And he's right that foundations are key. So as a cardiologist, we often start with that. So we'll measure leaders' heart rate variability for either 1 to 3 days to just look at what's going on with their without asking any questions, like what's going on biologically and
I
have you
love
got the
it.
holes in your bucket, to use your metaphor, and then plug the holes. You've got to fix those foundations. And so, what we've seen when we record people's biology and then start coaching them is we can improve your biology by about 30% in 6 months, which effectively B is making you 10 years younger, giving you the energy you had 10 years ago. So you can reverse. So there's basically how it works is you have a 3% decline in your energy levels year on year. That's if you do nothing, you basically decline. But if you develop some skills to plug the leaks in your bucket, you can reverse that decline and you can increase your energy by 30% in
Wow.
6 months, which is effectively making you 10 years younger. So that's the foundational start is plugging those leaks in your bucket and then start to build on that. Like, okay, how do I really get much better control of me? And how do I start myself on a journey where I unlock these levels that I didn't even know existed?
Incredible. So as a physician, right, and I've always been fascinated in this, and I feel like it, and you might just go B, but I look at you as a physician and now what you're doing, but like when you think about organizations and corporate world, etc., we've got the HR department, we've got the various different departments, but I've always thought, where is that? Where is that physician? Where is that, like, and I'm not a doctor, whatever you want to call it, but someone coming in and actually assessing the biology of the leader, the biology of the team to really, because it is so interconnected. So
Mm.
do you actually play that role in business? Like, do you go in and assess leaders that way? Or like, I mean, you can't, like, if they don't want to, like an actual physician or a doctor looking at them, like, there's obviously that. But it's such a modern, what you're talking about is so modern and it's so required in today's world because I think about life, leadership, and business. It's all interconnected. Like, there's no such thing for me as work-life balance in terms of you don't just there's it's balance is such a annoying word for me because it's all integrated. And so
Mm.
you might get your best ideas at time when you're walking your dog, which I certainly do when it comes to my business because I've got the clarity and I'm walking and I'm not distracted. But is that something that you do in your business in terms of you'll go in and you'll, from a foundational perspective, you'll assess, yeah, the biology
Yeah,
of the team, the biology of the leader.
we definitely do that. And so that because there's this quantified self and people are very interested now in looking at their own biology.
Yeah.
And you've got these wearable devices, and we can talk about the quality of them. That's a whole nother conversation. But there's a much greater interest in this. So we'll often go and do exactly that. And there are essentially three reasons why this matters in business. So
Mm.
first of all, actually, if I measure your heart rate variability, I can tell you when you're going to die. So there's about 30,000 papers in the scientific literature all about heart rate variability being able to predict death from any cause, heart
Wow.
disease, cancer, even accidents, which is pretty interesting.
Mm.
So there's this rich literature. So I often joke with organizations is we can measure everybody here on the executive team, and I can tell you when any of you are going to die. So probably quite important for succession planning.
I
And they
love
think
that.
I'm joking. I'm not, so it's like, okay, well, don't appoint them because they're probably not going to be here. And so they all kind of laugh, not realizing I'm completely serious, is I can risk assess everybody. But having told organizations this for 25 years, B, nobody's ever asked us to help on that basis.
But that's so
So,
needed. This is sorry,
no,
sorry,
exactly.
Alan. This
But
is like
it's
a
part of the,
solving the world's toughest problem. Sorry, I'm
yeah, no,
getting
it's
all
part of the
excited.
problem. Yeah. So let's park that as a reason. Okay, don't engage on those bases. If you don't want me to give you the energy you had 10 years
Mm,
ago and reduce your risk,
mm,
let's forget all of that. The second reason why HRV is important in business is it quantifies how much energy you've got to do the job.
yeah.
Now, as you found, is it's easy to burn out, it's exhausting. So you can predict that by quantifying. So if we'd have measured your HRV 6 months before you imploded, B, we could have told you you're about to implode. And we often do that with leaders and emergency intervention because they're about to hit the brick wall.
Mm,
But the third reason is mainly why people are interested in talking to us is your heart rate variability alters the quality of your mind, your quality of your thinking. And that's why people get hired and fired and promoted, right? Is how smart are they? So heart rate variability affects the quality of your thinking, your ability to solve problems. And so that's largely why. So they ignore the fact that it can, risk predict your health or not just your mortality, but your morbidity. We can tell you if you're likely to keel over or burn
mm.
out or whatever. We can tell you how much energy you have or haven't got, all of that stuff, but mainly the quality of your thinking. So HRV gives us lots of insights into the quality of your thinking, and we can help with that. So that's the third reason is largely why organizations talk to us.
Yeah, and so what do you use for the HRV then? Do you use a form of tech or like what are you
Yeah, just a
using?
standard heart monitor that you'd get, like I used to use when I was a cardiologist, is we
Right.
get you to wear a heart monitor, wander around, because the wearable devices that you see, these watches and rings and so on, nearly all of them tell you they're measuring HRV, but they're really not. They're not measuring HRV accurately at all. So, I mean, they're useful in the sense that they start to get people to pay attention,
Mm.
but they're not really measuring it properly and they're not giving you good quality data. So the field's gradually improving over time, but it's still well short of where it needs to be from a quality perspective.
So fascinating. So you've been talking to people about this and taking this into businesses for the past 25 years, 24, 25 years. Uh, in terms of, I guess, do you think it's getting better or do you think it's getting worse? Do you think I guess my question is, do you think leadership is suffering more? Or do you think, like, I mean, obviously you're making a difference when you go into the businesses you're going into. But looking at everything, and we're going to come into AI in a second because I'm keen to understand around your AI and human connection piece here. But the world is in rapid change. The pace this year has been quite astounding from where we were at the start of the year, even when it comes to
Mhm.
things like AI. I look around and, based on, I burnt out 3 years ago. And I look at certain leaders and I think to myself, gosh, we've still got such a long way to go. And it's not often you hear of people like yourself, that physician and bringing that into, you know, I guess for me, bringing into kind of how do you transform leaders? How do you transform teams and businesses from the inside out? And this is a big part of what I see as the future model for to actually address this. Like,
Yeah,
what are you
so
seeing as the
is
biggest
it getting
issues
better or
right now?
worse?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I think it's getting gradually better. So when many years ago, one of the very first times that Daniel Goleman, who popularized the whole notion of emotional intelligence, came to the UK, I keynoted on the same stage. The first time he came to the UK, I was one of the other keynotes at that conference. And when the whole notion of emotional intelligence was in its infancy, now it's sort of de facto, like everybody talks about it, people are starting to understand it's pretty important. So there's a much greater understanding of some of the critical pieces. There's a lot more people talking about the importance of waking up and growing up than there was when we started. So gradually people are improving. Leadership is gradually improving. I mean, there's some notable examples of regression around the world that we could clearly
Yes,
talk about,
totally.
but gradually there's an improvement.
Mm.
The real question is it improving quick enough to prevent a disaster? And that's a much more complicated question to answer. But I'd say gradually it's improving. But have we got a long way to go? Oh, we've got masses. But I think of it more about, how much more potential there is to come from human beings,
I think there's huge
which is
amounts.
partly what the AI book was about, is how do we unlock our untapped potential?
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a course in 2023 when I was coming out of I was in my research mode after, experiencing my burnout and coming out of my previous career. And I was, studying all the flow science and neuroscience, nothing like you, but in terms of also what the future of flow looked like and the role of AI. And I think at that point in time, I was like 1% of the population that was actually studying it, even though AI has been around since the 50s, or machine learning, if you like. And this whole course was an 8-week course that was all around the human potential and the possibility and what's possible with AI versus looking at AI to solve everything and do everything. Tell me a little bit about your exploration of a human and the AI connection, and in particular as well, like in terms of even what you and your wife are doing with your business, and how you see the opportunity and the integration from, I guess, from an innovation sense as well.
Yeah, so one of the reasons for writing the AI book is there's so much Armageddon stories being told, robot takeover, super intelligence, we're all just going to become, pets to this super
Yeah.
intelligent AI and the overlord and all of that. And I thought, well, of course, if we don't plan the future, there is a risk of that, but there's a whole nother story that isn't being told, which is the upside of AI, which is how do we use AI to accelerate our own development. So AI, it can go one of two ways. Either it becomes the greatest tool humanity has ever built to create suppression, i.e., the AI is making us dumber. So if we become addicted to ChatGPT, for example, we can't make a decision. We have to ask
Mm,
ChatGPT.
mm,
Eventually, over time, we become more stupid. Or we can use it to advance our own intelligence, which is what essentially we wrote about. So there are two scenarios. Now, of course, if you're a bad actor, if you're a malign tech giant, you want to suppress the people because it gives you all the power and all the money.
mm, mm.
So you have to look at what people are saying and what their motive for saying it is. So it beholds a lot of the people who want to create that outcome, so they have all the power and all the money, is to create fear and chaos. So in that fear and chaos, don't worry, everybody, will fix the problem. So that's why people tell those stories. But actually, we wanted to tell a different story to say, well, you can use AI to evolve your own intelligence. And that's the story we told is what does that look like? How would you do that? And so create what you might call a symbiosis between humanity and AI itself with as we build more intelligent AI that hoovers up all the knowledge. So currently, most LLMs have read every research paper, every book ever written, every newspaper, all the public information is already in those large language models. So it's kind of like a hive mind, a collective wisdom of humanity. Now we can use that wisdom to accelerate our own intelligence. So we can use it to repress or to liberate.
Yeah.
And it's that liberation that the AI book is all about. The book's called Smarter Than You,
Oh, I like
right?
it. Smarter than you.
Winning in business. with AI superintelligence? How do you use it? So AI is not a problem in and of itself. The main problem is human stupidity. It's not artificial intelligence. So if we're stupid about the future, we'll use it to suppress everybody, and therefore we won't that won't result in a good outcome. Or if we're smart about the future, we use it to liberate and unlock these levels of human potential we're yet to see in the world.
Yeah, and that for me is a subtractive psychology piece that comes through in terms of, we've got so much going on, and from a cognitive overload, we're multitasking, we're doing all these things that we shouldn't be doing. And, any wonder we can't get those fresh ideas, those fresh perspectives, the clarity that we need to be able to, solve the problems of the future, the problems of tomorrow, and create and innovate. And so I feel like for me, AI in particular is subtracting all the lower value tasks that are unnecessary, that I don't need to do, that it can do for me, so that I can tap into and be doing what I'm meant to be doing. And that
Yeah.
for me is a real game changer. And that's where the possibilities are endless if we look at it that way. And I think that's what's so there's so much opportunity in business and in leadership as well, and for teams.
And the secret, B, is, how do you do that in practice? So the theory of what you say is spot on, but how do you actually do that?
Yes.
And in order to do that, to unlock that, you have to really understand how the human system works.
Mm,
So, for example, the nature of innovation, one of my 12 books, is called Innovation Sucks, mainly because most corporates are terrible at innovation. So
mm,
in the UK, for example, corporations waste 65 billion pounds a year on failed innovation and failed product
mm,
launch. Now,
mm,
with your background, I'm sure you've seen plenty of that. Um,
mm.
so we're big corporates are bad at innovation. So we literally suck. And one of the reasons is the way that we think about innovation is incorrect. Is that we have this sort of R&D funnel model where we have 50 ideas, become 30 ideas, become 20 ideas, become one, and eventually we launch one product to a market. So we have a funnel with stage gates, and so that's the current model of innovation. It's very clear in the pharmaceutical industry, that you
Yeah.
do this and eventually you have a drug to market. We're saying no, that's completely wrong. Is rather than push things through a funnel, what you do is you flip the funnel, and you start with an answer and you get the market to suck. So the market just pulls the answer forward. So rather than pushing an answer towards a customer base, you get the customer to suck the answer. So if you do it properly, innovation literally sucks. So this is called an impeller as opposed to a propeller. So rather than propelling a load of ideas through a research funnel until one succeeds, is you start with the answer and you get an impeller where the market sucks and proliferates one clever solution into a multitude of solutions. So I wrote a whole book about how do you innovate innovation? How do you do that properly? So a lot of the books I've written are about, there are answers when you level up. How do you fix education? I wrote a book about climate change. How do you fix that? I wrote a book about the food industry. And I've written books about once you're at these higher levels, the answers are there. And that's kind of why I'm writing these books. Is, if we do the work and we do the study and the research, you can figure out how to solve some of these seemingly intractable problems. They are solvable, but you have to put the effort in. So to convert flow state, for example, like what does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Mm.
How do you actually do that? And what are the consequences and how would you sustain it? Um, so it comes down to putting the effort in to figure this stuff out so you can make your life better.
Yeah, because it's always interesting whenever we talk about problem solving, because we're so quick to always go problem solution and like not doing the work, whether it's the inner work, etc. So I like to term it solution finding, and it sounds like
Mhm.
that's exactly what you're talking about there. How are you, rather than push, it's like pulling it out. And so the solution is, you have the problem, but then how are you finding that solution? What are you doing to find it? How are you exploring it? Like, I don't know if I'm making sense there, but for me, it's what you're talking about. It reminds me of what I call solution finding.
Well, and in that solution finding, two things are key, right? Which is the solution that a 6-year-old comes up with is very different than the solution that a 12-year-old comes up with.
Mm,
The 12-year-old can find a much better, higher quality solution than a 6-year-old because they're more sophisticated.
mm,
An 18-year-old can come up with a better solution than a 12-year-old. So
yeah.
there's a basic principle. The more you mature, the better the solution you can find. So the real answer is less about solution finding, it's about your level of personal maturity,
True.
right? So
Yeah, it's a
if
good
you
point.
mature and become more sophisticated, you get much better quality answers. So the work is inner work with you becoming more sophisticated. And so, for example, going back to the foundations, is if you don't get your own biology under control, your brain is shut down just because your biology is in chaos.
Mm,
So we used to be called complete coherence, now complete, but the biological basis of flow state is a coherent state, which is sort of
absolutely.
stable dynamic biology. The more coherent you are, the more you unlock the cleverness in your own brain. So that's the foundational moment where you start to train yourself to become more coherent until you can become completely coherent. That's a foundational breakthrough
Mm,
and start to unlock some of the wisdom that exists inside of you already. Because
yeah.
you're
Well,
already complete. It's about unlocking these levels that already exist inside you,
yeah.
Bee.
When I
That's the unlock.
no, when I came to realize I was complete and it was all within, I was like, wow, like, it's amazing what you find within that has been there forever, but you weren't accessing it.
Yeah,
You weren't accessing it all. And yeah, like people quite often will say to me, you look so different. And I'm like, I don't look different. I don't feel different. But I mean, I do feel different. Don't get me wrong. I know I've changed so much, transformed so much from the inside that it's funny how people can. Someone said to me a while ago, "You look whole," and I'm like, "Oh, that's fascinating." Just a few more questions for you. The biology piece. I've always had this in my exploration and my research. I'd love your thoughts on this. Is humans have a system, we have biology, but I also believe there's business biology. There's like, a business is a living and breathing system. A team
hmm
has its own biology as well. What's your view on that in terms of what I'm talking about here is that humans have a system. A business has a biology, has a system too. It has a mind, it has a body,
hmm
like it's the organization, and it has a heart. Like, do you think that's like have you ever thought about it that way in terms of
Sure.
it starts with a leader? Don't get me wrong, it starts with the individual, starts with a leader, but it's all well, it's one big system. It's one big biological system, like whether it's the leader of the team or the business. Mm,
Sure. So, one of the ways of thinking about this is as a cardiologist, if you go to a cardiologist and you have your ECG or EKG measured, they put the electrodes on your skin. Why? Because that's where the conductance goes to,
mm,
particularly over your ribs, and you can pick up your EKG, the bump, bump
mm,
heartbeat. But with modern equipment, you can actually pick it up a few feet off the body.
mm,
So we actually broadcast our biology. Now, if you've ever watched any of these police shows where you broadcast heat signals and you've got the camera in the air following the perpetrator running across the field. So we're broadcasting heat, we broadcast light, we broadcast our EKG. So our biology doesn't stop at our skin. We radiate this. So if you have a team in a room, our biology is affecting the other people in the room, and their biology is affecting us. So that's the biology of the team.
mm.
Uh, so this is basic science, right? In the same way, particularly in flow states. If you look at flow states in nature, I mean, a lovely example, and this is happening in the UK right now, the murmurings of starlings. 100,000 starlings moving as one in this beautiful dance at dusk. Now they're not doing collision avoid. These aren't fighter pilots doing collision
No.
avoidance.
Yeah.
They're sensing each other. And the same would be on the barrier reef, with a shoal of fish. A shark comes in and they all move as one.
Yeah, I
They're
love it.
not talking, oh, quick, turn left, shark coming. They're not doing that. They're sensing through their lateral line the energy radiation of their neighbor. The same thing is true in a leadership team. It's just never spoken of, that there becomes a vibe in the team. Now,
Mm,
what sets the tone of that team is the most powerful force, positive or negative, usually the leader, the most powerful force in that system, sets the tone for the team.
Yeah,
So
100%.
once you understand that, you can start to use that constructively, is to create a different vibe in the team and
Mm.
create more of a flow state in the team. And then you do that in multiple teams, and then you get the flow state in an
Yeah, the
organization. So
collective.
this is basic science. This isn't woo-woo. This is
No,
basic
no, I
science. We
know.
radiate
Yeah.
biology and we're affected by each other.
Yeah, it's a very, but it still feels very new in business. Like it's not something that is talked about a lot, but yeah, it's very natural to talk about foundations and everything else. I am very conscious of time, and I know it's, early Monday morning for you, and so you're only just starting your day. Three more things, and I'll be quick. You mentioned pre-show learning and development. Let's quickly talk about that. You said we mix the two together quite often, and yet they're two very distinctive.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit. Can you talk to me a
Yeah,
little bit?
our view is that 20% of the benefit is in the learning. Learning is essentially the acquisition of skills, knowledge, and experience. But development is when, okay, now I've acquired that knowledge or that experience, can I change myself as a result of what knowledge I've acquired? Because if I just acquire the knowledge, I just know more stuff,
Mm,
but I'm the same idiot
mm,
because it hasn't resulted in any change in me.
mm,
So the real value of learning is the deployment of that learning to change myself. That's
mm.
development. So we say 20% of the value is in the L, 80% of the value is in the D.
Yeah.
Now, organizations have become obsessed. I mean, again, I've seen many organizations, oh, we want to become a learning organization, which is an idea that was really peaked in the 1990s. I said, no, actually, what you really should become is don't worry so much about the learning or being obsessed with the learning.
Mm,
You need to be what the Americans now call a deliberately developmental organization.
mm,
It's called a DDO, deliberately developmental organization, i.e., convert the learning into development. So you become more sophisticated. That's where the real competitive advantage. It's not the
mm,
fact that you acquire the knowledge, it's the ability to use the knowledge to make a useful change, to become more sophisticated. So L is not D. They're not interchangeable. L is the access point to the D. It's the D that's the real game changer.
Oh, I love that. It's so good. It's such a good point. And it's something that, yeah, we need to be clear on more often rather than just wrapping the two together. And I also think learning is can create cognitive overload too. Like we add. At what point do we then go, all right, what am I doing with all of this? And
What I think is
that's
interesting about cognitive overload, B, is that when you level up as a human being, cognitive overload actually ceases to exist as a problem,
mm,
right? Because with each new level, more speed, more energy, more capacity to eat,
yeah,
more complexity. So cognitive overload is when you're at this level, I can't cope with anything more. When you move up a level, you can eat all that stuff at the previous level. So the cognitive overload problem that existed at the previous level literally disappears at the new level.
yeah, yeah, it's a really good point. I love that. I love that a lot. Okay, last two questions. One's actually words of wisdom. My final question is, what's my final question for you? What do you think? What do you think is the biggest opportunity as we head into 2026 when it comes to leadership?
Well, as I say, we're about waking up and growing up, right? So, um, if when people struggle in life, the struggle is there as a lesson to teach you something, and you've lived this, B,
Yeah.
is it
Oh,
it stopped you in your tracks and it woke you up. So, if you pay attention,
slapped me in my tracks.
yeah, exactly. One of my heroes is a guy called Joseph Campbell, who was the guy that inspired George Lucas to do Star Wars. And he has this lovely quote, where you stumble, there lies your treasure,
Mm,
right? Which
I
is
love a
beautiful,
quote.
right?
Where you
Yeah,
stumble.
there lies your treasure. So sometimes when we have a difficult moment, there's a real sort of silver lining in that. And if you're paying attention, you're kind of the more sophisticated part of you, which you haven't yet fully embraced, is trying to teach you something.
Mm,
So in your particular lived example, B, sort of are on the point of implosion. And had you not had that difficult experience, you wouldn't be doing the work you're doing now. You wouldn't have woken up.
no.
So as we move into 2026, um, pay attention to the difficult moments because there lies your treasure. There's something really important that if you can extract that, you can become more sophisticated, more energy, more speed, more fulfillment, more enjoyment. You're at the cusp of waking up to a whole new level of yourself.
Oh, so good, Ellen. I think that I was going to ask you if you've got, well, I mean, I'll ask you anyway because you might. Do you have any other wise words to share with the audience?
Um, be curious. Be
Mm,
curious about what's possible for you. So often we think, we've reached a certain level and this is now our life. We've plateaued. And if just people can be curious about, is this all there really is for me? Is this now my level? Uh, and I can honestly say, having spent, I think I calculated recently, 110,000 hours studying and researching these types of questions that you've been asking me. And by the way, 110,000 hours is the equivalent of 11 medical schools, or if you work for 8 hours a day for 40 years without a day off, that would be 110,000 hours. So in my life, I've done 110,000 hours of study and research, and I can honestly tell you, there are many more levels than people realize that most human beings are yet to unlock. So be curious about what those levels are. And if they want to follow me on LinkedIn or read any of the books I've written, trying to give guidance on how do you get to these higher levels, these levels of capability where you can have a more enjoyable, more fulfilling life, live your life more on purpose, understand yourself and self-awareness. Self-awareness is often talked about by leaders. And I go, well, hang on a minute, just do a little thought experiment. You know, self-awareness, awareness of self. Like, what is self? What is this thing that I call myself? That's a very rich and very interesting question. Who is myself?
mm,
And so, one little thought experiment to leave you when just tease people sometimes going, have you ever had a day where you, oh, I'm really fed up with myself? Yeah, that's happened to me. I said, it's interesting. I am fed up with me. Who's the I and who's the me? Who's the I that is fed up with? Oh my goodness, there's two people. There's an I and there's a me. So be curious about who you really are.
really
Be
good.
curious about what you're capable of and start pulling on that thread. And it's a really, probably one of the most interesting and exciting journeys you'll ever take. It's a real adventure, that inner discovery. So
Oh
that's what
gosh,
I would
yes.
encourage people
Yeah.
to do in
I
2026.
say I'm recovered, but I'm certainly a work in progress, and it's continuous. It's a continuous journey. Once you start that inner discovery, it continues and continues. And even when I was telling you what
And it's
happened in my
interesting.
car pre-show tonight, I'm like, what's the lesson in
Yeah.
this? I went straight into what am I learning here? What's this trying to tell me? And
Mhm.
it was I think about things so differently, and I respond to things so differently. Don't get me wrong, I still have my days when I'm in that I drop into survival, and I'm like, okay, hang on. How am I oscillating out of this? How am I getting myself out of this? And it's always coming back to within. Alan, what a profound conversation for a Monday. You've truly inspired me. Thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful, and I'd love to get you back on the show at some point next year. Who knows?
Yeah.
I might have a little panel. I've got all these ideas,
Oh
and
yeah, that little panel. Yeah, yeah. Well,
yeah, get
I'm very happy to share whatever I've learned on my journey because having been obsessed my whole life, 110,000 hours, you pick up some insights,
yeah,
and we really have a business that shares this to try and improve leadership around the world
yeah.
because the world needs better leadership, right? There's no
Oh,
doubt.
God, yeah. Yes, it so
Um,
does. I've
and
been
so
trying to
that's
get my
essentially what
doctor
we're doing.
on as but he's been unfortunately I'm going to get him on in the new year, and I'm going to say I've had a doctor on. It's your turn now, and he's all around the functional medicine and the preventative, and he worked a lot with me in my whole pre-burnout and in through it, and yeah, I just think that what you're doing and just this, yeah, I'd love to see more of this in business and
Mm,
organizations in terms of that
mm,
ability to start with those foundations and get to really what's making you tick, and yeah, it's really profound. So
mhm.
you and your wife are ahead of time in terms of that you've been doing this in business for so long, and I just think the world is ripe for it. So thank you very much, and
My
yeah,
pleasure.
have a wonderful day, Alan.
Yeah, and you have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks for that.
Bye bye.